Okay, we'll go ahead and I'll let them unmute us first. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Today's our work session, September the 8th. And I'll turn the meeting over to Don to lead us through these topics.
Yes, sir. You can see the first item of discussion. We do have Ms. Ash here, our tax administrator, and she is going to go through a PowerPoint presentation discussing our 2021 reappraisal.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The first thing I wanted to make sure of, and we can obviously go back to it at the end, was there any questions about the schedule of value standards and rules from last week I presented? No questions?
No.
Okay. We can always get back to it if you have some.
After reading all of it, it was perfect.
Well, good. That's what I like to hear.
Now, Ms. Ash, all of that is online. Is that correct?
Yes, it is on our tax administration website under real property. The proposed schedules are both there. So, and they will remain there until they're adopted, then they'll be flipped to adopted. So, do you want me to run the mouse or?
It's up to you. It's here if you want it, or
You can just write. So what I prepared in addition to the schedule was just what I'm going to call an information packet. So just kind of go through what the reappraisal is, some of the figures that we're at right now, and then just our status so far. So what is a reappraisal? It's the process of updating real property values to reflect fair market value as of January 1, 2021. So that's what our goal is currently. And fair market value is defined in the general statute as the most probable price a property would bring in an open and competitive market. It's also a hypothetical sale because obviously every property is not selling in that meantime. So what we're looking at is all the sales in that particular neighborhood to try to determine a value for that particular piece of property. So it's more of a hypothetical sale. And it's in North Carolina, we are 100% of market value as well. Some other states are on a 50% assessment ratio, something like that, but we are 100% market value. And we are required by general statute to perform a reappraisal at least once every 8 years. Currently, we're on a 5-year schedule. The last one was at 8 prior to this one, and those prior were 4-year schedules. It's a little easier to keep up with market value on a 4-year cycle. And they have the less sticker shock, as they call it, when you do an 8-year, because the market changes drastically in an 8-year period. So it's a little easier to keep track on it. 4 years is a good cycle to keep on. And the reason we do it is to establish the fairness of the tax burden between properties, which typically change in value at different rates by location and property type. So we're just looking to equalize the tax base. So we're just making sure everybody's paying their equitable amount for their piece of property. And this is just our previous reappraisal cycles. And I put 2025 as our next one. We'll see. That'll be your determination if you think we want to make that a different year. But I would prefer to go back to a 4-year after we get done with the 2021. But that can be a discussion for a later date. But that just shows you our cycles since 2000. And this shows you all of our property owners, which is kind of surprising. If anybody knows anybody in Nebraska, we're looking for someone from there to cover all our 50 states. But we do have property owners from all over the place. 49 out of the 50 states, Australia, Japan, England, Germany, all over. So
Wow, that's interesting.
yeah, we do have a lot of diverse property owners. So that's one of the things I mentioned too in our Citizen Academy, because you would never realize a small county like this would have that diverse of a population, but we do. In this county, we have 17 different townships. That is not including our koala boundary. That's obviously not taxable at this point. But so there's 17 minus the koala boundary. And then those pictures aren't showing up at all, aren't they? Oh, you can? Okay, I can't see it from here. And we also, inside of those 17 townships, have 386 neighborhoods. What we've established the neighborhoods for is so we can look at that particular neighborhood to see what the sales are, what the market is for that particular neighborhood. This could be just mountaintop neighborhood. This could be Silver Rural, could be thousands of parcels. We just try to look for areas that are very different. The sales in there would reflect each of those property owners. But then we get in those rural areas, a lot of those could be, Canada's basically one big township. So minus a couple little neighborhoods inside of it. The next one just shows our parcel count by year. You can just see that we're gradually going up little by little in our parcel count, which is good. We're not completely flatlined. We do slow down sometimes when we have a lot of combinations of property. We have 3 or 4 different lots that combine back into one. But for the most part, we still have a pretty consistent growth in our parcel count. On the next one just shows the difference between our taxable and exempt parcels. So we only have 2.35% of our around 40,000 parcels that are actually exempt.
I do have a question.
That's okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
With this parcel count, I'm just curious, like, let's say Bear Lake Reserve, when it was purchased, it was one big parcel, and then as each individual lot sells, then that becomes separate?
Yes.
So it's not still considered part of Bear Lake Reserve?
Correct.
Okay.
It could still be in their ownership, and we have some that were grandfathered in.
Okay.
So their plat may be on file, but they don't actually become a lot until it's sold. Some of them were already processed through. So it just depends on where they fell into that cycle. But majority of them, if they were plat out and sold, then they're obviously one separate parcel. So
And is that true like at High Hampton or?
yes, yeah, across the board. So once they sell, then they
Then
they
they-
break off, and some
okay.
of them will be a lot at a time. Some of them will go in and just divide the entire property into lots up front.
Sure.
So it just depends on that particular neighborhood and what they want to do. And I think the planning restrictions as well weigh into what they can do. So
Thank you.
Now, what's that 2.35?
that is our exempt parcel. So
I
that's
understand that. What are they?
state of North Carolina owned properties, the county
Forest
owned
Service.
property, the Forest Service,
Truck-
churches,
the urban-
Western,
Western, yep.
Is that part, is the reservation part of that 2.35?
So you're saying that includes national forest?
The property that's owned by the United States Forest Service, it would be, yes. Because we have particular parcels for those set aside. The issue with the reservation is we don't have any parcels for them because we've never been able to establish a taxation in there. So we wouldn't be able to distinguish a parcel in there to start with. We used to just do mainly, we called them leaseholds, and they were just kind of made up numbers with the account number when we actually could tax some of the businesses. So that would not include those, but it would include all the state of North Carolina, Western, SEC, schools, the county owned property, churches, cemeteries, all that stuff.
And so that's just the number, that's not acreage, obviously.
No, that would not be by acreage. If it was acreage, it'd be a
big
lot
chunk.
larger percent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
because those Forest Service properties take up quite a bit of the acreage.
I think that's what threw me off when I first saw that.
Yeah, that's just in general out of the around 40,000, how many of them are percent wise as exempt versus, yeah. And then value wise, the number jumps up quite a bit to 11.06% of the real property value is considered exempt. I mean, you think about Western by itself, that makes a big chunk of it. And then the county owned property, state owned property, Forest Service again, all that adds into that larger portion.
now would their value be determined, like say at Western, housing around there is a prime value. Is Western's property itself rated at that same value?
Yes.
So then Forest Service, because it's undeveloped, would be rated at a much lower value?
It would be because it's larger acreages, so it would be valued just like if you owned a 500-acre piece of property. It'd be very similar to that. It's a very low unit price just because, big tracts like that don't sell for much per acre. But we do attempt to value them at market value. There was 10 years ago, maybe we picked up all of Western's sorry, this is Kevin. He's our reappraisal coordinator. We were contacted by Western. I want to say I was here, so maybe 2008. They contacted us and said, we're having some issues with funding because you guys don't have us properly assessed. So we did go in and pick up every single structure, and we've made sure we kept track of that over time. We obviously don't get their building permits, so it's kind of one of those things we have to kind of track on our own, but we do the best we can to make sure we picked up all of the new dorms, all of the new businesses in there to get them on the tax scroll, regardless if they're taxable or not.
Exactly, so we know, that's
Right. And this just shows our taxable real property value over time. You can see our big reduction we had when we put into our 2016 reappraisal into effect. But since then, we've slowly grown. We've been increasing every year, which is good. Everything just keeps going in an upward cycle since we put the 2016 reappraisal into effect. And Dawn, I added some percentages on this one because I know you'd asked about the PUV percentages. But this is just a breakdown of how much value we have in additional exempted excluded value, which is our present use value program, and then our property tax relief programs. It's a very small portion overall. And Dawn was asking about that when I met with him. For the most part, it's less than 5% in the most recent years of all the additional stuff that we get removed out of that taxable value. So this is a little different because it could be a portion of the value as opposed to the entire property as a whole under that exemption.
So for example, for 2020,
Uh-huh.
if I look at the previous slide, it'd be the 9 billion, right? Whatever, yeah.
Mhm, yeah.
And subtract the 3,024,100, well, actually the sum of those three
Right.
on this current slide.
Right. Yeah, I added all those together. Dawn was mainly asking, I think, about PUV. So it'd be a little less than that if you're just looking at the present use value portion. But yes, that is exactly how I.
The reason I was asking, this is for the agricultural community, the state sets those values, correct?
Right.
TGV. So if
Oh,
we have
okay.
when you go and look at the overall percentages of values increasing, and then we look at a revenue neutral rate. So you set the tax rate to create the same amount of revenue. Sometimes you want to look at that as how it impacts the agricultural community, because those values are set by the state, not by us. And so, for example, if we'll talk about it a little bit later when we start talking about values, what's the percentage of values going up? Because that would cause the tax rate to go down further if you were doing a revenue neutral rate, and it would positively or negatively impact the agricultural community.
All right, and this is just some other information. This is just our parcels by property type. We have quite a bit of vacant residential. We're pretty limited on our commercials. That just shows our bulk of our county is made up of residential property and vacant property. It's kind of surprising to still have that much vacant property left, but we still do have 44%. So.
Now, when they mean vacant, what is that? Just means that no one lives there?
There's no residential structure on there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
So it's
just a plain
but
piece of
somebody
land.
owns it, but it's just
Right, yeah.
residential.
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't have
Wow.
any structure on it, or it maybe just has some outbuildings or something like that, but not like actually improved. And then that changes drastically though when you look at the improved residential is 72% of our actual real property value. Commercial jumps up to 11, and then out of all that vacant land, we go down to 16% of the tax base, which makes sense, but it is a bigger portion, or a much smaller portion. And these numbers that we're getting into kind of surprised me, but I knew last month was crazy, but we had the most deeds recorded in a single month last month since December 2006.
That I heard from a realtor.
It was a busy month, so we're expecting to really beat the number from last year. The deeds have just grown and grown and grown, but it was a lot of deeds recorded in last month. And then on the next side, the plats were last month were the most recorded since July 2007. So we're back to pre-recession time with our deeds and plats coming in. So that's a good sign for us. I think we were a little leery when the pandemic hit that we would be in a bad situation, but it seems like everybody wants to live here. So I guess that's a good thing. The deeds keep coming in. So, and then as far as our building permit numbers, we also have to go out and review all the building permits to make sure we pick up our new construction. So those are staying pretty good in line. I'm not sure if they'll catch up to 2019 numbers, but we are still tracking those. And then this little chart just shows all of the sales from 2018 up until present. So you can see all the little clusters, and then you see the clusters over in Canada and Caney Fork and how limited they are compared to some of the other areas as far as just cluster wise. Then on our next one just shows our sales by property type. The majority of them were just improved residential pieces of property that was 1,656 of the sales were improved residential properties.
Would townhouse condo include those at Western, multi-family residents at Western? Not Western owned, but the ones around it?
Most of those would just be apartments.
Oh, okay. So
Townhouses,
what do apartments come under?
they would just be under, the commercial. I'll go if I can find it on here. Improved commercial, the blue,
okay.
yeah. And we don't have necessarily a lot of those that sell. So this is just looking at the
that's right.
sales.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of those they buy the land and they construct the buildings and they don't really sell that much. We have a lot of condo and townhomes. If you think like Sapphire, they have like duplex triplexes. They also have some, condos and things like that. We don't have a lot of townhomes and condos.
That's what I was thinking.
And this next one just shows by township where the sales are. You can obviously see that majority of the sales are in Castres and Hamburg townships. And then it drops down from there all the way down to Cullowhee, which makes sense. There are 3 biggest townships generally. So. And then as far as our sales ratio study, this is the information that we provide to the Department of Revenue every year. Also, in addition, we do a small sales ratio of each neighborhood inside, but overall, you see in 2019, we were at 98.12%. And then we dipped into 92.7 very quickly so far this year. So our sales are definitely improving because we were staying just around a couple percent down. Now we're already moving to 8% down. So. And then
define sales ratio for me.
Sales ratio is the difference between the sales price and what we have it assessed for.
Okay.
And the goal is obviously to be 100%, but the further away from that reappraisal, the further you get from the values. Luckily, we're under 100 because I remember a point we were at like 140, way over it. So it's better to be under it, but you don't want to be too far under it where it looks like you kind of missed the mark on the reappraisal in general. But it's expected if the sales continue to the magnitude they are and they continue to improve and be more, that you're going to be further away from the 100%. And then just as far as our staff, just some general numbers. We have 4 field appraisers. We have 1 office appraiser that's currently vacant. Applications are due today if anybody knows anybody interested. And then we have Kevin Ford, our contractor reappraisal coordinator. He's been with us for 18 years. He also does Macon County for 20 plus years. Something like that. Just a general overview of how many people we have working on the project. And then the next one is just our reappraisal review. So we did River, Mountain, and Hamburg townships were our physically inspected townships that we looked at. So we went to every property in those 3 townships, knocked on their door, asking some questions, did that. And then the remainder of the portions were our office reviews where Kevin went through it or I went through it. We're just trying to find the mark on market value. But then on our next slide, we'll show we started doing a project in July 2011 when we realized we weren't going to do a reappraisal in 2012. And so we went ahead and started doing a physical inspection of the entire county. So for the 2016 reappraisal, we had done all of the other townships, physically inspected them. And then this last time we finished up 3 that we had not done. So since 2011, we have physically inspected all of the properties in the county, which is good. And we want to continue to do that. It's might take 3 or 4 reappraisals to get through with it, but we do like to continue to have a presence in those townships, make sure people see us. Even if we don't find anything wrong, that's good with us. We're just trying to make sure we're out there doing what we can to make sure our information is correct. All right, and then here is our percent change. So they vary from just 1.77% all the way up to 26.99. Now, this is not every property in that township is going to go up by that percent. That's just saying our values at the end of, or once I did billing for 2020, what's the difference in that value and where we're currently looking at for 2021. A lot of that in Cullowhee is going to be the apartments. We've seen an increase in those. So obviously those are going to be a large portion of that. That doesn't mean things on Murray Hut's going to go up 26, 27%. So that will be isolated by neighborhood as well. But that's just a comparison from where we were this year to where we currently see us going for next year. We're still working through several of those townships to finalize them. And we still have plenty of sales coming in. So those numbers could definitely change between now and the end of the year. But that's just where we are currently.
So countywide, the average is 12.75.
Yes.
Why would Webster be so small?
Just if there's no sales in there to
It's
to
more
one,
stable.
yeah, I mean, if-
Okay.
right, yeah, and you get that a lot of times. I mean, Webster's not a very big township, so if you're not seeing a lot of new construction or a lot of changes, I mean, the neighborhood just stabilizes,
Sure.
and that's okay. I mean, every township, varies in growth, and that's just kind of one of those things you have to track. So yeah, they don't have much new stuff going on, and the sales are just staying pretty consistent with our market value, and that's expected from some of them. So
That percent change is from the last appraised value.
yeah, the values that we established this year so we make sure we had growth and everything. The numbers were a lot larger when we looked at 2016 to current because we weren't accounting for that growth. But when I looked at from this year's file to that one, that's where we're at currently. And then for our comparison for 2016, as you can see, every township went down. All of the blue is below the 1% because all of the townships went down in value, with the exception of Dillsboro City was the only one that was actually in the positive for percent change. And this year, or for next year, hopefully we should all be going in the opposite direction where we're all seeing some growth. Like I said, some could be minimal like Webster, but we are seeing at least going to the positive end instead of all of them going on the negative, which is always a good thing. And then just the next one is just the residential structure parcels by type. Again, we obviously have a huge portion of just single family residences. And our mobile homes come in at about 15%, and then everything just cycles down from there. We don't have, obviously, we just have less than 3% of townhomes and duplex, triplex. We just don't have a large portion of those in the county. And tiny homes, that is a new code for us this year. So we've got some of those put in, but they're not adding up too quick, but I think that they will over time. So, but we do have a new code for them this year to be able to value those.
Just anecdotally, one of our professors from Western designed a tiny home sheet. Aaron Adams is professor of interior design, and it was featured in a North Carolina magazine.
Oh,
And it's on the Tuckasegee River, her
Uh-huh.
lot.
Yeah.
But it is, if you've ever been, she gives tours and stuff, but it's beautiful. It's very
yeah,
small.
there's some really nice ones in Cashers. I think they're
Yeah.
$150,000 or something. It's a bargain.
Yeah.
They're beautiful though. I mean, the details immaculate.
It's
And the next one just shows the percent by value. We have greater than $1 million, we have 14% of those residential structures that are greater than $1 million. And then this is just some of our commercial structures. We have 40 of them. So, but these are our main ones. Obviously, apartment, 26%. We got a lot of warehouses, whether it be mini warehouses or any other type of warehouse. And those make up the majority of our commercial value drivers, our apartments, and then there's our warehouses. And then some of the other ones just fill in. Clubhouses, almost every subdivision in Castries has a clubhouse of some sort. So those kind of fill in there too. Oh, we did have mini warehouse. We just got warehouse at 21 and mini warehouse at 6. So those do take up a huge portion. And then as far as the schedule values and standards and rules, this was a requirement of North Carolina General Statute 105.317. And you have to have 2 separate schedules, one for appraising real property at its true value and then one for appraising the present use value. And then, like I said last week, these must be approved by January 1 of the year they are applied. And then just proposed timeline, submitted them on September 1st, the proposed schedules. We are going to hold that public hearing on October 6th, and hopefully we'll be able to adopt those on October 13th. And then the effective date of the 2021 reappraisal will be January 1. And our goal is to mail reappraisal notices on February 1. We don't want to send them in January if we can help them, just because we have all of our listing time for personal property at that time. So sending an additional 40,000 notices on top of the 5,000 listing forms can get can be a lot to deal with in an office that's not very, big. So we probably will send those out in February, hopefully February 1st to get those out. And then they'll have a 30-day appeal period. And then we'll have to review those. And it's an ongoing cycle for several months after that with reviewing of appeals and working appeals. And then just for our upcoming reappraisal, which we can talk more coming forward, because we got a few months left to be in that, but we desperately need new appraisal software. So I'm just gonna go ahead and throw that out there. It's 40 years old. I think that's what Kevin said. He estimated to be about 40 years old. It still works, but it's a lot to try to get information out that I want to use. Even just these numbers, it's us kind of reconfigure things to try to come up with numbers. And obviously Darlene's need these numbers, and those issues can be kind of cumbersome when you're trying to look in a software where you have to use English statements. So Kevin's a whiz at the English statements, but it takes me a while to get list county, select parcel by township.code, like all that fun stuff. And just some other stuff I put down. We could use pictometry. That will allow us to review the properties a little better that we can't physically inspect, and that just flies the aerial photography at a lower level, and you can also look all around the house, so it's an easy way to check. And if building permits and things like that continue, we could also use more field appraisers, because we're running it at both ends. But that's all I got in that portion. Anybody got any questions?
I did have one question. I got a phone call from Connie Orr, who's a commissioner in Graham County, and for one of their goals, and you may have heard this as well, Chairman McMahon, but they're hoping to submit for legislative goal to get forest property some reimbursement on some level for state forest lands. And because Graham County, a huge percentage of their land is that. And I just wondered what you told us what percentage. Do you have any idea what the value of that would be? Or you can look it up. I mean, I'm sure you don't carry numbers like that in your head, but
Are exempt for property value,
yes,
or just
for just the national, I'm sorry,
just the Forest Service
would
property?
it just be state? Do you know, Brian, from her?
Well,
Is it just state or is it national?
we get some money, payment in lieu of taxes, PILT money for federal
Right.
lands, and we get Forest
She-
Service money, don't we, from state?
She
property?
wanted
Oh,
for, Evidently, the state doesn't or something.
We get the.
Yeah, we get national, but she was saying more from state.
What is the state forest? I thought we got the pill.
There's another package.
I was thinking it had to do with the schools and the timber sales.
It is.
There's a revenue
But
source.
it's not every county gets it.
No,
Well, and I just wondered if, that's something that she was just wanting us to consider that as one of our goals. And I said, well, we certainly would
Well-
consider it, but we also had something else in mind. But
I feel like Graham is like 60%.
Oh, it's a
I could
lot,
be
and-
making that number up, but it's a
their tax
huge,
base is
huge
so small.
portion that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, same thing with Swain, but Swain has more federal, I think, than Graham.
yeah, payment in lieu of
Graham has
taxes,
more state.
that has been a
Yeah,
high on the list with the
Right.
association for decades. Because
Yes.
it's never fully funded.
no,
I can't even remember the last year that they fully funded.
Yeah.
It's been so long ago.
and they're in considerable need right now.
Yeah,
So-
I know Swain struggles with that.
Would that
as of-
benefit us if we,
If they pay us more, yeah.
Of course, yeah. I mean, we definitely are not suffering anywhere near as far,
No.
as far
Oh my
as
goodness.
some of those other counties.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if they based it on
Yeah.
percentage, what the benefit would be. But I mean, anytime they want to pay us back for something we have to lose money on is a benefit. I think.
okay,
Yeah.
Could you, this is where I've looked at some of this stuff before, but if it wasn't just state forest service, but all state property, that's where
Western
Jackson County
yeah.
would probably have a,
SCC.
Yes.
Well, and then I know, like, for example, for state property, for like fire protection, there is a
Well,
allocation made from the state to the fire departments to pay for state property coverage on fire protection. I don't know if there's certain properties that are exempt, others may, but that in itself is a sort of a payback. But
Thank you.
anything else?
I don't have anything else unless you want me to keep talking about something.
Mickey, did you have any questions?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you
Good?
very
All
much.
right, thank you. I'm always available if you come up with some. Thank you.
Next, we do have Nick Breedlove, and Ms. Breedlove requested to come before the board to give a tourism industry report, but also has a request for a safety study to be conducted by NCDOT in the southern end of our county. Mr. Breedlove.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I hope all of you are well, and it's a pleasure to get to update you on some tourism information. Given the COVID situation, we wanted to provide you a number of updates, which I won't go through the packet I sent you. It's about 13 pages of very detailed updates as to what we've been working on since March. But primarily, we've been focused on the recovery for our industry, our hospitality industry, the jobs supported by that, our retail, our restaurants. So since early March, when the pandemic hit, we have worked nonstop to help our industry recover. During March, April, and May, we lost about $14.5 million alone just in visitor spending in Jackson County. And that does not take into effect resident spending. So we saw significant dips in occupancy tax and the ripple effect those have in our community. almost half of our hospitality workforce was laid off during that time frame, and we're seeing that rebound a bit, but we're still feeling the effects of COVID. We are seeing some positive increases. June, for example, was our largest June in our history in terms of collecting occupancy tax. So we are beginning to see that rebound, which is positive news. And our vacation rentals are up significantly, almost double what they were last year, which it shows that there's demand for vacations to small rural destinations like ours that are off the beaten path, that have the social distancing built into nature, like we have. We started early on with our messaging to promote our outdoor spaces. We put our residents and our citizens' safety first and foremost. And when we started advertising, we promoted our great outdoors, and we promoted that people should dream about their next trip to Jackson County and inspire them on that trip. Over 97% of people, according to a study this week, find pleasure in planning for a vacation. So we've been providing a lot of beautiful photos and imagery so that when it's safe and people feel like it's a good time to travel, we're ready and we're here for them. And I've got a number of updates to share with you on the screen, and I'm gonna share my screen now with you guys. So bear with me, please. Brian, if you'd let me know if you can see that.
Yes, I can.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I love pictures.
So as I mentioned, our goal since the pandemic has been to work with our partners to reopen our visitor economy with clean and safe visitor experiences, and to promote and highlight nature, parks, and outdoor experiences, the less crowded places. And we've developed messaging related to health and safety to reassure our visitors, and we've worked with our restaurants, our retail, our lodging to implement all of those best practices throughout the county. And we've worked with our partners to ensure our recovery and resilience, so that should we encounter a future wave of the pandemic, that we're prepared for that. So this graph shows the continuum of the pandemic from the initial phase of mitigating the COVID-19 cases to restarting our economy, to reimagining what our economy looks like post-COVID-19. And while it feels like we're restarting our economy, we're still in that mitigation phase of battling COVID-19 cases here. Unfortunately, we've been lucky to have fewer case counts than some areas, but we're beginning to see our economy restart and rebound, especially with June and July of this year. So that's very positive news. Last week, we received our visitor spending numbers from the state of North Carolina, and this is a study they do annually with the U.S. Travel Association. And we did see an increase last year, and visitors spent almost $207 million in Jackson County. And that's roughly $568,000 a day that goes into local cash registers, which is, it keeps food on the table for our local citizens, helps them pay their mortgage. It also keeps their taxes lower because almost $9.5 million of that comes back in local sales tax to Jackson County. We are right now this week working on reprinting our visitor guide, recognizing early on that COVID-19 would impact what that looks like, the events, what's open, what we should tell our visitors. We printed a limited quantity, and we will be reprinting our guide in the coming weeks with COVID-19 safe messaging. So I'll show you what some of that looks like. We begin with a welcome to our visitors, letting them know that their well-being is our #1 priority. And you'll see a number of our visitors and our local restaurants wearing masks for their safety. Most travelers say that they feel more comfortable going to a destination where masks are required. So we're showcasing that and our wide open spaces to people. We're promoting something similar to Leave No Trace. It's called COVID-19 Recreate Responsibly. It's a new initiative that encourages people to leave no trace, but also be responsible in the COVID-19 era. So that's one of our first few pages in our visitor guide. My coworker, Caleb Sullivan, our sales and marketing manager, put together a great family field trip itinerary, which is featured here. Realizing that schools have shifted all online, we wanted to give families a sort of field trip so they could visit the North Carolina mountains and learn about social studies, art, biology, and the Great Smokies. So we're featuring that. We're promoting that we're the hammock capital of the state, so all you need is 2 trees and a hammock. And we're also promoting an itinerary called Avoid the Crowds. We're sending people to more remote areas that they can enjoy without encountering crowds, which we know they'll appreciate. High Hampton, just to continue the updates, is scheduled to reopen in the April-May timeframe in 2021. I toured that property almost 2 weeks ago, and they have between 200 and 300 people working on that site any given day. And it's astounding the amount of work, investment, and the number of new amenities that facility will feature. It will be renowned in terms of the number of restaurants, activities, and things that the visitors can do while there. And that's in partnership with Blackberry Farms. And so we're very excited about that. And I'm able to share these photos of a finished cottage that High Hampton shared with me. It looks very rustic, but they've refinished everything from adding Wi-Fi to air conditioning and all the modern amenities.
Air conditioning.
So they've invested tens of millions of dollars in that property, and it's going to be absolutely beautiful to reopen next spring. So in positive news, like I mentioned, our occupancy tax collections, this says July and August. Now keep in mind, those are for June and July stays. So they stay in June, those taxes are then remitted in July. So you'll see in 1920 in July, we collected 122,000. This year we collected 187,000. So while COVID has hit our economy and our hospitality industry greatly, this shows that travelers throughout the Southeast particularly are looking to get out of congested cities like Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, and they're coming to the mountains. So that was a 53% increase in June that we saw that we did not expect. The same with August. I just got those numbers today, and that is our highest month ever in the TDA's history at 233,000 in occupancy tax collections.
Wow. That's usually when school starts.
You'll also see this graph of occupancy. So occupancy is simply how many hotel rooms are booked. And you'll see the green line is this year. And you'll see where we were down initially versus last year in June. And then we started increasing, and now we're actually exceeding what last year's figures were. While some of that, much of it is leisure, we're also getting a lot of construction traffic from the DOT, the Walmart construction project, the dorms, or the dorm and the student housing complexes in Cullowhee. And so we're sitting between 70 and 80% occupancy for some weeks this month. In great news, last week we found out that our state tourism office approved a grant for us for $88,000 for advertising. That's money that we receive in a credit so that we can advertise, and it's through the CARES Act, and it has to be used up before December. So we're primarily going to advertise in November and December to come enjoy our winter adventures and our less crowded destination. As you know, October is already a busy leaf season, so we're trying to get visitors here when our economy needs it the most. And lastly, if you follow us on social media, our social media sales and marketing manager, Caleb Sullivan, always finds these amazing scenes that are captured by our visitors. And it's my favorite part of a presentation to share beautiful images that our visitors capture, and then we get to share with you guys and our audience. So that concludes my report on the state of tourism. I know that the written report was fairly comprehensive, so I'd welcome any questions at this time.
Any questions about the report?
No, but thank you so much. And I know that I talked to I know the rafting has been really good. I wonder if maybe you could add one of those pictures. Of course, I know that's about, you know, as it gets colder, that ends, Nick, but I know that that's one of the things that you can do safely, social distancing, because usually it's just a couple people or a small family in a raft. And I know we have some great rafting businesses here in Jackson County.
That's right. Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
And also, I just wanted to say I appreciate your adding the website. It looks so good, and our Keep Jackson County Clean and Green, adding that to your website. Thank you so much for doing that, our litter campaign.
Thank you. And now on the agenda, I have a request for an NCDOT safety study. And you'll have that before you.
Did you see those pictures? It's terrible.
So in the Cashers area, we have two highly utilized sites that have insufficient parking. And the first one is Silver Run Falls. There's a photo that's not in your packet that somebody sent me from this last weekend that shows a child walking down the road with his family. And one of our board members counted 22 vehicles at the Silver Run pull-off this weekend, which if you've been to that pull-off, I don't know how you get 22 vehicles on either side of the road. But the challenge there is there's limited parking, and it's one of our most popular waterfalls because it's easy to get to. And for a lot of people with accessibility issues or our elderly population that cannot walk in Panthertown Valley to see waterfalls or take a 1 or 2 mile long trip, Silver Run is a site that you can walk a 1/4 mile, 1/2 mile, and see a beautiful waterfall. So this is a heavily utilized site. The challenge is people are parking on either side of the road. There's a blind curve where traffic is oncoming. When you back out of I would say there's probably 6 or 7 good parking spots. When you back out of those, you pretty much have to gun it to get out of the way of oncoming traffic. You've got people walking in the middle of the road. And while there's not been an accident yet, we do hear regularly that it's a concern for visitors and it's very unsafe. So we would ask that the county work with the DOT and request that they do a study of that site in conjunction with the U.S. Forest Service, who owns that property there, to determine what additional improvements might be made long-term that would keep our visitors safe and prevent a potential fatal accident in that heavily visited spot. And our second request is very similar. We have something in Jackson County called Shadow of the Bear, which it's a really spectacular thing to witness. It occurs mid-October through early November, and the way that the sun casts its shadow there on Whiteside Mountain, it creates this bear shadow. And it's the only place in the country you can see it. It's so popular that Land Rover actually came to Cashers to film a commercial there. And the Weather Channel features it. I got an email from United Airlines 2 weeks ago, and they're featuring it on their airplane magazine that goes in every seat pocket. So as you can imagine, over the years, the popularity has increased, and it's not just a Jackson County attraction. It's people drive over from Highlands and Macon County to see it, and really all throughout the Southeast. The challenge there is when people line up to see it, there is no actual place for them to stand that's very safe. In this photo right there, that's not during peak time, but it looks like there's a sidewalk on the right of US 64. That's actually just shoulder. It's not really a safe standing place for people to observe Shadow of the Bear. And you'll see in the forthcoming photos how congested it gets. Those are vehicles swerving around, parked vehicles on the right side pull off, double parked vehicles. And you'll also see in these coming photos of children walking through cars coming in both directions. It's a very popular attraction, and one, I believe this would fall under the purview of the DOT. But you've got families right there and children on pretty much what's a 1 or 2 foot shoulder with cars going around them. And it's not only a popular spot during October, but people pull over there because it's almost Jackson County scenic overlook, apart from the parkway, that people pull off to capture Whiteside during sunrise and sunset. Our fear is that during peak times, there's potential for an accident, and there's not adequate parking, and there are safety issues. You'll see in the bottom photo the number of crowd that gather there. So we'd like to, with both of these issues, we feel safety of our visitors and residents is paramount. And we'd like the NCDOT to conduct a study, especially during peak usage, to see what might be a long-term fix, realizing there's no quick solution to this, and perhaps look towards the future on these safety issues.
Any objection to that request?
No, I was wondering if we could maybe add one other location up in Cashiers, well, I'm not sure where, it's on Whiteside Cove. We take our children, do we call it Little Sliding Rock? Do you know what I'm talking about, Nick?
Yes,
and we had the same issue. We take our grandkids up there, they just love it. But the parking is just along the road, Whiteside Cove Road, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the traffic, it backs up there as well. And is that also considered, or is it maybe not as a big concern? I don't know. It was when we were there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Commissioner Woody. That is a site that we do hear complaints about. We haven't heard as many this year, but that's also U.S. Forest Service land that that it's very popular with our visitors, and we would welcome a study on that if feasible.
Okay. So would you like to add that?
I would like to add that if y'all feel, because I do believe it's the same. It may not be the volume because it's not quite as a busy corridor as between Highlands and Cashiers, but it's still very much a parking issue and kids getting out of cars and that kind of thing to go there. And it's a great place for families.
Okay.
So.
All right, well, if no objections then we'll just add this to the agenda at our next meeting.
And if in the interim, before something could be done, could signs be put up, like congested area or slow for, I don't know, congestion?
We do have some of those at the Shadow of the Bear site, and they it's like asking people to drive the speed limit. Some people pay attention, and
sure,
you know, it's
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, commissioners.
All right, thank you, Nick.
Next, we do have Mr. Elders in here with us. I'd asked Tony to come and talk to the board in regards to the request for erosion control jurisdiction. So I'll just turn it over to Tony. We have two things in the packets. One is the proposed letter, and the other is the actual ordinance itself, a local ordinance that we have. It's an agreement, I think, a memorandum of agreement between North Carolina Sedimentation Control Commission and Jackson County. Mr. Elders.
Thank you. Don asked me to kind of put this together, said y'all are interested in requesting the state to allow local programs to enforce erosion control on state projects. Just a little background, if you don't know, we're officially a delegated local program authorized by the Sediment Pollution Control Act, I believe it was 1973, 73 or 76. The state didn't really start pursuing the local program side of that until early 2000s. Jackson County is one of the first counties in the West to do it. I believe it was the year 2000. We became a local program. The state offered 1 truck and 1 year's salary for a person to start. That's how we started out. Over the years, the program's expanded to, some people have other duties, but I have 4 guys that work at least part in erosion control. But I don't need to remind y'all of what happened up at the Cullowhee site. I still maintain the problems there happened because they had a pre-construction meeting on February 13th of 2019. And the next time the state was on site was in June when we got the first complaint. So it's, I'm not picking on any person there. They're short-staffed, an hour and a half away, and they cover 22 counties with about 3 people. So that's the land quality division, which is over most of the erosion control projects. Water quality doesn't get involved until something's actually in a stream, and they come and do different things. But so I put the letter together, kind of give a little bit of the background. Also reference the memorandum of agreement. This is not our erosion control ordinance, but memorandum of agreement we had to sign. I think the most recent one that we found was 2012. Every so often they update it, ask us to change a few terms to match a new state law or something like that. But probably the important part of it, when you get to the Appendix L of the memorandum of agreement, that highlights some different things. I think that's in your packet there and find my Appendix L. But this was signed by the Board of Commissioners back in 2012, 2013. The first part just goes through and talks about how you enforce it, how they issue notice of violation, what to report, things like that. And then it'll tell you in there a couple of places that the state has concurrent jurisdiction with on any of our projects. Since they kind of were embarrassed with the one they had at Cullowhee, they're really trying to scrutinize ours now, just to inform y'all in case you get funny calls from them. They're showing up on our jobs now to see if we're doing our job, but so far so good. But that 113A56, that general statute is quoted in Appendix L, says the commission shall have jurisdiction to the exclusion of local governments to adopt rules concerning land disturbing activities for those 5 things, basically state or federal government projects or anything that's funded in whole or in part by the state or the United States. So generally a TWASA project, for instance, they're putting in a new sewer line up there along that same corridor of those apartments. I'm already getting complaints, but we have no jurisdiction over that one. We're just documenting below and above the project in the Cullowhee Creek, and then they'll be heading up Long Branch, Little Savannah there, past the apartments, and it's to expand the sewer capacity for the new buildings Western plans to build. I dealt with Jim Schwam at the State Credit Union this morning with a complaint about the work going on there in front and behind their building in Cullowhee. So it's always been that way as long as I've been here, probably since the act came out. But it does tell you on below that in that subsection B, they can delegate it in whole or in part to any other state agency. It doesn't say any other local government or anything like that in that section. And that's basically how the Department of Transportation operates. They operate it as a delegated program. They're their own erosion control supervisors. So if any of you are still around, remember the R5000 bridge project out here. We had quite a time with that, with the mud in the river. And that's actually what spurred our River Watch program, where we started taking pictures every day up and down the river, because there was nothing we could do about that one either. So, but that is basically the background from what Don spoke to me about when we draft that body of a letter to see if y'all want to turn it into a resolution or whatever y'all would adopt, whatever that language is.
And I think the way Mr. Elder's written the letter, that I would propose to the board that this be recrafted in a way that gets sent to our legislators and gets sent to, I'm trying to figure out how this would be a goal. We might have to think about, could this be a goal to go to NCACC? We're also just trying to try to get state law crafted to allow for this to occur. And I think, Ron, you had mentioned that the way this would be written would be local options to allow local entities to have that local
You can buy in, but you didn't have to.
Yeah, just give the, otherwise some counties might look at this as being an unfunded mandate or
Right.
brings the state again saying we gotta do
Sure.
something. And that could hurt the ability of something like this to pass.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point.
And we would continue like we do now. I mean, they've done a lot of turnover over there, so I don't even know the last person that got hired as our regional rep for the state. But in the past, we've had good relationships with them, and we would lean on them for our projects. If we had a large project come in, we wanted help reviewing a set of plans or anything like that, they would help us. Because they do, as it states in here, they have concurrent jurisdiction over all our projects. They can come in at any time and do it, and they've always been helpful. That's not been an issue. This last one's kind of strained the relationship a little bit with one or two of them, but
So technically, let's talk about technical part. Is this the state basically allowing Jackson County to enforce state law? Is it a?
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, it's the state authority that we're dealing with, correct?
right.
Not Jackson County authority.
Right.
Yeah, to be a delegated local program, we had to adopt an erosion control ordinance. We still have that, although it's been morphed into our UDO now. But my first years here, and all my adult life before I got into this job, if you had an erosion complaint in mud in Cullowhee Creek, you called the Asheville office, the state office, and they might get over here in a month, or 2 months. And we had another dorm project on campus, Balsam and Blue Ridge, a few years ago, and I knew the young lady pretty well that was the inspector from over there that came over to supervise it, and they knew that she would be there between the 1st and the 5th of the month. So between the 1st and the 5th of the month, that site looked pretty good. The rest of the month, they really didn't care. So,
Yeah, that's,
it's kind of that way. But on our sites in general, they know that Steve or one of his guys are going to show up about every other day on the large sites and once a week on the smaller ones. But it is.
well, and I do appreciate the fact that our local inspections are so well done, Mr. Elders, and I appreciate that you keep abreast of that. And I think that this resolution would allow us, like you mentioned in your first couple statements, that it was so many months before they even came and looked at the one in Cullowhee. If this would pass, this, as a resolution or change, that would address that, we would have local inspections going on, which is our goal.
Yeah, it would have really helped up there. I mean, the problems are well documented, and
Yes.
an erosion control plan has a construction sequence, and that particular contractor skipped to about step number 5. He cleared the entire site rather than a couple acres at a time that he was supposed to, because he didn't want to rent the stump grinder twice. So
Yeah.
that was his excuse.
Yeah.
So, and once he did that, it was kind of over then. And it was hard to, you can't hardly catch up on those once you start out wrong.
Sure. Thank you.
Any questions for Tommy? Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's take,
So, please, board, what I'd recommend 2 things. One is craft a letter to our legislators, just going ahead and asking for this change. But then 2, we can craft a little bit more generalized language to be part of your goals going to the Association of County Commissioners.
Yes,
Is that a fair statement of what we're going to do?
I think that would be a good path forward.
let's take about a 5-minute recess. Okay. We'll go ahead and come back to order.
This is, next item we have is, we have Mr. Chad Parker here with Public Works Director. This is a response to just have been a lot of discussion with the board about energy efficiencies at the new health department building and the proposed animal rescue center. And so these two projects were approached a little bit different, and just the reason they were approached different is one is just a much larger administrative space than the other. You know, the health department's running around a little over 32,000 square feet, all administrative space. So this was deemed appropriate to bring in an energy efficiency design assistance from Duke Energy. So we're not, this is something that I know Chad had worked with Duke Energy on a little bit. We're not going to go page by page over this with the board, but I thought I'd just provide you all the technical data on this, and this is for the new health department. And so, Chad, I'll turn it over to you, and you want to control this?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we can just go to page 5.
Okay.
And
And so what this is we brought Duke Energy in to come in and do an assessment of the building and make recommendations on energy efficiency.
yeah, we met, the date of the document's 2018, so was in the planning stages of the building. So we met with the architect and Duke Energy, and they helped us put together some things that we could do in the project. There's a summary, I think it's a summary page 5. No,
It's right here.
well,
Selected
It
strategy.
is 5.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what, I can't see the page.
We're right, and it's real small. Page number.
It's very small.
that's it there. So I don't know how much you want to go through these, but just basically talking about, you see the top one there is the 41% of the total project as far as energy initiatives, incentives from Duke Energy. It's basically the heating and air system. They have a variable refrigerant flow, heat recovery with electric backup, and a dedicated outdoor air system with DX cooling with a gas furnace. So basically the variable refrigerant flow is the same type of system that we have at our old courthouse and library. And that allows the refrigerant to basically, in a nutshell, you can heat one room and cool in another room on the same system. So the flow of the refrigerant goes to where it's needed, basically. So, and also you should have some cooling in the spring and the fall when there's not the temperatures outside are conducive to do so. So other than that, if you go down, the mechanical is some of the parts of the HVAC system. And the architectural basically is the glazing on the windows. And then we have the white roof, which we have actually, every roof we've replaced with the county for the last few years, we've been more white roofs so that we can gain some energy efficiency. In this building, we used to be black, now it's white. So that's something that we've been doing and we will continue to do, except for shingled roofs that we have, county buildings. We don't, we go back with shingles generally there. Electrical, the exterior lighting was reduced, the kilowattage on that was reduced. We have the daylight dimming controls for office space, and then treatment as far as clinical spaces, and then the vacancy sensors for different office spaces and the treatment as well. And then the lighting power in the different offices and the treatment and the laboratory, the power was reduced there. And the hot water heater is a 95% efficient natural gas hot water heater. And then you have a machine roomless elevator that makes up 13% of that. And so those are basically all the energy efficiencies that are put into this building.
Are those vacancy sensor controls? That means like if you are in a room, the lights come on automatically. And if you leave, oh, that's great. Thank you.
Somewhere in here, there's a return on investment. I think it's 3-point-something years.
3.2.
I was just gonna mention real quick. See what page it is.
It's on page 13.
Take that away from him.
Left and right.
Yep, that's it.
It's at the last sentence. And
Oh, that's not, that's great.
And so, again, you have a lot of opportunity there without much administrative space. So we took the time to go through and get this full report done through Duke Energy. If you look at the Animal Rescue Center, I did have our architects just give us some basic things that are in the Animal Rescue Center: LED lighting throughout, automatic lighting controls using occupancy sensors, what you were asking about, for interior lighting and for photocell lighting control panels for the exterior, use of methane gas from the existing landfill for building heat, domestic hot water, and radiant flooring, energy efficient HVAC equipment, a number of low flow plumbing fixtures, and energy efficient building envelope, including glazing and wall symbols. So it's a lot of, these are also not only just recommendations from Duke Energy, a lot of these things that were in that plan are also standard energy efficiency guidelines that we try to follow. But going back to your question too, about the sensors for interior lighting, the Animal Rescue Center, Commissioner, we will also have those.
Good.
And this will be online, and if anybody asks us, we'll just try to remember this meeting date, and we can always refer back to the information online here as far as energy efficiency schools facilities. Any questions?
Any questions about the energy stuff?
Okay. The next item, and I've asked Chad to be here too, this is that, as discussed prior, we are currently out to bid for the Animal Rescue Center. I did reach out to the Health Department. The Health Department will be here next meeting. It's coming Tuesday, I think September 15th is the meeting day. They will come to discuss all the animal counts and things of that nature, Commissioner Deeds. Today's discussion is really in regards to if we proceed forward with the awarding of the bid with the Animal Rescue Center. This is a discussion about how we would provide services for SRC on a temporary basis. As this board is aware, we're looking at other places for permanent locations, but that is still an ongoing discussion. So things, whether it be discussions with the town of Dillsboro and other issues, obviously has delayed the moving of this facility to a permanent location. So the temporary solution is proposed to be this, and would be this unless the board wishes to change something. Built into the bid documents themselves is that the contractor, and what I have on screen here is basically the site, the aerial of the site itself, just to remind everybody, closed landfill, current Dillsboro SRC site, Green Energy Arts Center. Basically, here's the back area, the old Webster plant. So the road itself, for the most part, the entry part of this will have to be utilized by the contractor on a daily basis to come in and out, not only for their workers, but for all the materials in and out, things of that nature. As we continue the development of this site, I don't know if you recall, but one of the original plans was to actually cut this site down. But as we got to looking at the topo of the closed landfill, we were going to cut that down and use the dirt to come up and help us with the walking trails of the landfills. Determined that it really just wasn't a great use of this space, and it was unnecessary to cut the space down. So in essence, in the plan, all of this space will be saved, this space meaning the SRC. The idea being is these kilns will be located up here where these back dumpsters are currently. And what we will need to do is during constructions, we will need to reserve about the back third of this property here in order for us to start placing and building these kilns. All right, so what is being proposed to be done is we'll end up building a fence here, and just for the board's information, Chad has brought the public services out. We've talked about, I think you've gone out and measured things, correct, Chad, to make sure the trucks can move in and out of there, things of that nature. So it'd be proposed that we just build a fence here with a double gate that would allow the overall project to continue. They can come in here and start building the kilns out on these pads back here. But that we would leave this area open for public use. We would end up moving these dumpsters to the front area here. And we would leave this open for public use as the project is going on. Now, there will be some conflicts. And what I mean conflicts is there will be occasions where we will have to either alter the hours of operation and or temporarily shut down the facility for days at a time. In essence, where that's really going to be necessary is in this intersection right here. When we're dealing with utilities and methane, and as we are developing the entry points to the walking trail here and here, there are just going to be times when there's grading and utilities in this area right here that will have to just cause us to temporarily shut down operations. The only other alternative would be to try to find a temporary location elsewhere, which would be potentially significant as far as costs go, because you would be basically building an SRC site that wouldn't be permanent. And it would also not provide as much functionality. We've gone around and looked whether or not we can put compactors and dumpsters in various locations. And the reality is we might could find another smaller location, but you would not get the same level of service that you would get here. More than likely, when we've looked at this, about the main thing that we may lose is this electronics.
Yeah, there's two things, those two sheds there. One's the electronics, the other one's the swap shop.
Yeah.
During the temporary time period, you would lose the service there.
Well, the swap shop's been closed during COVID anyway,
Right.
because we go there.
And the electronics have to be
Two
cut.
shops.
And the electronics have to be cut.
Yes, so
That's what
we wouldn't be able to
Christmas
just move that one. So basically, we just send somebody that has an electronic that would come to this site. We just have to have them go to a different site.
But as far as recycling and as far as being able to throw away general refuse and so forth, the metal containment, things of that nature, everything else would be kept as is.
Yes.
Other than we would be moving some of these up here at an angle.
It will make the side a little bit tighter, obviously, I mean, by looking at it, but everything would be available at the site except for the swap shop and the electronics. That'd be the only two things that
Now,
would.
why can't you move electronics?
If we moved it, we'd have to move that shed, and it's a pretty good sized shed.
It's just one of those garage type things, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say that it can't be moved. I don't know that it would fit in that restricted area, the smaller area that we have there. We can check into it to see. I don't know that it will fit. By the time we move those three dumpsters on the other side, that we would have enough space
Then
to
you have to turn around.
to get it in there. But the reason we have to cover those is because there's cardboard boxes inside there that you put your electronics into, so we don't.
We just have just enough room, if I'm not mistaken. We're gonna put the double gates about right here for this temporary fence in case the vehicles need a little bit more room when they're pulling in and out here. Is that correct? As far as dealing with these compact dumpsters?
Those are pulled that way. The other two on the outside are pulled the other way. So,
So these are pulled this way,
yes.
and so we have just enough room here to make that work, and these are pulled this way, is that?
Yes.
But in essence, the good news is, again, we'll have to work with the contractor. It'll make that area busy. We'll have to have some safety controls there. But the reality is this would have to be The only other alternative would be to build out a temporary facility, which would be at significant cost. And it wouldn't be as good as this facility, basically, because generally the areas we've been looking at, as we all know, when you try to locate an SRC, then there's always people who may or may not be interested in having an SRC.
Well, this is gonna work right here, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
This is gonna work, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Then we got it.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution.
The main thing is,
And-
everybody, we will have to temporarily shut it down on occasion
Sure,
when we are working
that's all right.
at certain locations.
So you're gonna have any signage planned for when it is shut down to warn people, and even a sign that says no, assuming the electronics, it sounds like that's already not gonna be there, even signage saying, hey, no electronics accepted here anymore.
Certainly,
That's something that's worth looking at.
certainly we can do that. And as long as there's a contractor, because when they let us know, we'll post signage that.
Yeah.
So when we go
I
on
think that's a good solution.
when we go on pre-bid conference, this is something we put in the contract that they have to work with. Is we have to get the contract identified, get the timeline identified, and then hopefully what we'll be able to do is come out with a more comprehensive plan about maybe not the exact dates when it's closed, but how often and how long a period of time it will have to be closed.
And I think we would certainly look at days of the week. I mean, there's certain days that are busier than others. And like, again, we can deal with a contractor on that to hopefully be able to work those things out.
My understanding is that those kilns have been used primarily, I think almost exclusively by Western Carolina University, and that they built those kilns. And I had reached out to Dr. Erin Tapley at she's the head of the art department there at Western, and art education as well. And they're willing to build those kilns, and that would save us. I mean, it was a learning activity for those students initially to build the wood-fired kiln. These are not gas kilns or electric, they're just wood-fired kilns, and the students run them. And I think that they're willing to do that again, which would save us quite a significant amount, and even in the bids, we wouldn't have to put that in the bids.
So what's happened in the bid, that's not in the bid. It's
Oh,
a
okay.
set aside amount of money,
I see.
okay? And
Okay.
so when we do have alternates in the bid, but an alternate's not gonna necessarily be filling of the kiln.
Okay,
So what I've tried to do is I've gotten Tim to estimate the cost if we paid somebody to do it, okay? And then, of course, you're reaching out and finding groups that can do it for free. If we just plan on spending this a little bit of money right here for this fence, so I can
Yes.
separate and reserve the space for it,
okay,
then that can be decided.
Sure.
That can be decided maybe.
on
if-
them.
Even after the bid is done and is awarded to the general contractor, we've reserved the space here and we've got a good year and a half to make final decisions on how those kilns are being made. But the only thing that I can tell you that impacts this conversation is that, on those kilns, the brick and everything, it's gotten so hot that everything is somewhat fused together. So you don't really save a lot by trying to repurpose that. Now,
I'm sure.
what the quote that we did have does have a little bit of reduction if that person can go in and actually save it. Now, the
Okay.
only real timing issue that we have here is, and it's not, and I shouldn't say a lot of money, but it's thousands, it's not 10,000, it's literally several thousand that you would save if you repurposed it. And if we just can't get it worked out, then what'll happen is the contractor just have to come in and demolish it, and then you would have to build new, however it's built. Start over.
Sure.
So that's the only timing issue that we have is if we were gonna try to repurpose any of that. But the way it's been explained to me, it's pretty difficult to do so. We may be able to get, even when we start looking at
I'm
some
sure
of
that's
the shed areas, the cover areas up there, that's you know, we'll have maintenance go look at that, but that may be difficult to repurpose some of the shed area and so forth, the cover. We were even trying to look to see if we could use this cover,
Sure.
the existing cover there, and I think Tim was saying that was maybe too narrow. Is that what it was?
I think so. It didn't seem to me that he was going to be able to use it. So,
That old reservoir on there, you believe it's the same way?
we may
Well-
have to move it. I think what we may do is move it over closer to the building, but we will still have it on site.
I think that's a great idea with the fence and all.
Any other questions, Ben? Okay, well, thank y'all for investigating that. I think when we did the agenda, Don explained we had an add-on to the agenda. So item 6, instead of waiting till the end to take care of it, we'll normally do our other business at the end. So if it's all right, we'll just skip down to item 6. I think the architects are online. And that way we can go ahead and hear from McMillan, Patterson, Smith, hear from Mr. Roden. And then after his presentation, we can take care of the last item.
Okay. So, I'll let you bring them in and then we'll bring.
Big holes down there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They love it.
Hey, Dad, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Okay. So is Ron with you or with Ethan or?
No, Ron doesn't seem to be on, but Ethan is also here on the call.
Okay. All right, so what we'll do, have you gone online and looked at the information that we have in front of the board in their agenda packets? It's basically the email from Ethan and then also the, just the list of all the change orders.
Yes, sir.
So, the reason I'd asked McMillan, Patterson, and Smith to come before the board is that if you will look at 6A, 6A is just a summary email of what we're recently dealing with in regards to the health department project, Jackson Community Service Project, Community Service Building Project. And as you can see, what has occurred now is we ran into some additional issues with the site out there. And what I would do is just draw attention to the last sentence of the second paragraph. And states that all 2,000 tons of stone base are used on the site. This work would be around $90,000. Then if you go to the third paragraph, the $90,000 does not include any of the site remediation of unsuitable soils. And you can see at the bottom of that paragraph, it's an additional $30,000. And so as you keep reading, basically what has occurred is we've ran into that site multiple unsuitable soils areas. And then we've also ran into that once the pavement was filled up with not having enough gravel. And then obviously you're aware of the underground storage tank issue that we've dealt with. And so at this point, my response, once I received this email, and as you can see, that email was sent to me last Thursday, September 3rd at 3:48. My response to the group was, at this point, I do not have enough money budgeted at this point to continue on with these additional issues. So that's the main reason I've had to bring this back to the Board of Commissioners at this point. And so having said that, we're not going to necessarily focus that on this first paragraph or this first email. But having said that, before we move on, I'll turn it over to you. You and I talked about just maybe going through a little bit of the what has occurred at the work order, and then just sort of identifying where we started running into all of these site issues. Is that about how you recall us discussing this?
Right. Yep. I agree. And if you do have the site plan, available for the group to be able to see. I think that's going to be kind of a great way to kind of work through kind of just what has occurred, regarding the site. But just kind of really briefly touching on the past change orders that we've had to date. There's been kind of a series of unforeseens as far as existing conditions are concerned, related to the concrete slab and just things under the slab that have affected the inside scope. That I think, yeah, there we go. That contributed to some of these early on change orders. And just as a reminder, we did not have existing drawings to really go by. So some of this stuff kind of was, in real time, as we were demolishing, portions of the building, we would come across a condition and have to address it in kind of a particular way. So, that kind of gets us through some of the first few, some notable ones, just not to belabor, but, there was an extensive floor remediation change order under number 5. That is just due to the nature of the slab, and as we were removing flooring, and in some cases the flooring was removing portions of the slab. So when that all was said and done, we walked with the contractor and the flooring contractor and identified some areas of specific remediation. Moving forward into kind of maybe more kind of recent events, number 6, change order number 6, is really the beginning of understanding or starting to uncover some issues. And actually the first one, which was, I think is labeled as COR number 20, was the start of the storm drainage system at the high side of the site, right there next to the Board of Education. As they were digging, they stopped because there was free-flowing water underneath, which was identified by the geotech and our civil engineer as an underground spring. So, and this may be a good time, unless there's any specific questions, maybe if there's the site plan, is that possible, Don?
Yeah, hang on before we jump to that. So I'm going to jump back to this first page.
Sure.
So the reality is there's nothing major in these. Don't get me wrong, it's money, but there's no real major changes. I thought we actually got very fortunate with the building when we exposed everything, because we were fortunate that other than the shaft walls and the shaft walls that we tried in here, we didn't really run into any structural issues with the building itself, structural or roof issues. And so again, you don't want any change orders, but in a renovation project, I thought everything was going fairly well through here, again, until we ran into the site. And just repeating what Thad just said was, this is when we first started discovering just the unsuitable soils in the whole conversation. So what I'll do, Thad, because at this point, what Thad's going to do is start describing to you the storm drainage, and then down here, if you jump down to these proposed change orders, additional storm drainage and soils contamination, that's the $35,000 that we dealt with. And all of these issues here, what we're about to discuss in the site plan. So check that, I'll get the site plan up.
Perfect. So maybe we can start on the high side to the far left of the site where your cursor is, because that's where kind of the.
I'm sorry, Thad. Let me just make a.
Fair enough. Good point.
But basically, Board of Education is where my pointer is, and then the church. There's the road, and the church is where my pointer is in relation to the building. We're looking at the building here. And then obviously the parking lot there. All right, go ahead, Thad.
All right. So so the stream is to the top of the page, and I'm going to start at the bottom of the page on the far left, and that's where the first structure or storm water structure was starting to be installed. And where we started to find the water that was kind of free flowing. And so that was the first change order to remove the soils and come back in with stone to make sure that, it gets all installed correctly and it stays there and meets the design. As you start tracking down into the parking lot, to connect that pipe to other storm structures, we started uncovering additional unsuitable soil. So the way I kind of like to think about this is, because there's been a lot of kind of discussion about soils in this project, is there's soils remediation related to the installation of the storm drain system, so the pipe and the structure. Then there's soil remediation as it relates to the parking lot. So as we start digging out for the parking lot, you can see there's a gray bar on the bottom of the parking lot. That's where we extended the parking lot to gain those additional spaces. And so that would be another bucket. And then, you guys are all aware of the issues when we were digging and we found contaminated soil. So that's the third bucket. So all in that area, we have storm drainage being installed that needed over excavation and additional French draining. And so most of that has been identified in change orders as storm drainage remediation. Then the contaminated soils had to be removed, and there was a sizable, we did not expect to find a 2,000 gallon underground storage tank, but it was a sizable tank that needed to be abandoned and taken care of. And so there's that bucket. But then most recently, what Don then has shown on the screen from that email that Ethan provided is as we were coming in around to the other side, and if you basically can track and follow the site and see where the issues have been popping up, it leads into this area. And as they started to excavate for, putting in the parking lot there, they ran across exactly where the cursor is right now, running from the bottom to the top, all of that extent, and including in the middle of the parking lot as soils that, again, were unsuitable, that were too soft to be able to install. So that's one aspect of it, and I believe it's the $30,000 that was written in the email. In addition to that, as they started taking up the parking lot, it was discovered that the parking lot actually had been paved over more times than thought. So the thickness of the asphalt was larger than anticipated. So to bring the parking lot to the design elevation so that we are able to get positive drainage and flowing water to where it needs to go, additional stone needs to be brought into the parking lot so that we can meet that. So there was not that, we did not expect to find that thick of asphalt in this area. So that's kind of the stone aspect, which then jumps up that number quite a bit. And then the final kind of number, which isn't big, but it is included in there, was just the inclusion of heavy duty asphalt right there in front of the dumpster. Just because if you go down, keep going down to there you go. So just with some of the rework that had happened, because we had found actually in that area an undocumented pipe from the board of, from behind the existing building there. Just with all that configuration, because we were going to abandon that, we actually kept it in place. We put in heavy duty asphalt around it because of where the dumpster or the trash truck was going to be coming in. So we kind of reinforced that area. So long story short, starting from the left, and working our way all the way to that parking lot, we kind of kept finding, as we were installing the storm drain system, additional soils that were not suitable to be just left as is. So it needed to be addressed. And the final one would be, as we were getting ready to reinstall, this asphalt parking area and reconfigure that, additional soils in this area were also, not suitable, and we needed to bring more stone back in to get it back to a design level so that we can have proper drainage.
So, as you can see, as we're coming down our different change orders, going to the second page, we obviously ran into this $199,000 cost at this point. But then, as we started running into all of these other additional costs, it's really just starting to get into, especially when we start getting into this 191, all of these costs here. It's just really at this point, along with the additional months that we're having to pay rent, which is the rent for our temporary space is $10,000 a month. I'm calculating 12 to 13 or so, we're talking about utilities and everything. Ultimately, I am basically going to be out of funds and not going to be able to come up with approximately $190,000 to $200,000. Again, what you don't see on here is basically the additional 6 months of rent that was not budgeted also.
So the short of it is you need $200,000 roughly to make up the difference to pay for these change order requests, and we just take that out of contingency or out of fund balance.
Yeah.
Fund balance?
Fund balance or?
Mr. Thad,
Yes.
what other surprises may we look forward to?
If I had a crystal ball.
I'm serious.
And in all seriousness, we are concluding the stormwater system installation. So we're really not uncovering any more conditions. You know, if you keep working your way, which is interesting. We started, or the contractor started, the stormwater installation on the I think it would be the south side of so at the top of the page here, that's where the stormwater system was actually started, and we had a few change orders just because of undocumented gas lines early on, but again, there's not much there, you know, in the ways of digging. The primary digging was all on the bottom of the page there on the south side of the building. This should, I want to say this, that it should be it, because this is the repaving of this area to the east of the building should really be the last of the scope, and they should be buttoning things up and tying things in. So there really is not additional site work scope that should be uncovering anything.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was just to let the board know, we did have engineer firms go out, geotech firms go out. We proof rolled everything, and so I'm almost nervous to even say this, but my understanding, the proof rolling on this top area, there was no recommendation from BLE or from our engineers other than needing stone for elevation on this area, correct?
Correct.
So the proof rolling issues is we mainly ran into them over here. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we had already done so much remediation over here that that is why the proof rolling held up decent. Is that the correct statement?
I don't know what proof rolling is.
You basically load down, what you do is you're going across it with a heavy truck to see how well the dirt and or gravel holds.
Yeah.
And if it's not compacted well, it'll
Yeah,
move like.
I didn't know what that.
And
So you're testing it
we're
basically.
testing it to proof roll it to make sure that before you put pavement on there, that it's not gonna move
Gotcha.
underneath the pavement.
Okay.
So,
That upper end up there, that used to be, before there's any buildings there at all, that was a baseball field, and that was a swamp area up there. And it drained back toward what is the highway now. Scott, Hospital Road.
This area.
And that, and down there where, this area next to the church, there's some containers that are sitting on asphalt right now. You know what I'm talking about? That.
Mm-mm.
There's big containers down there where you all store stuff.
Oh, the Connex is that for the contractor.
It's
Yep.
that original asphalt there.
Yeah.
There couldn't be a problem under any of that, could they?
Not that I'm aware of. And again, the biggest issue is kind of more central in the eastern part of the parking lot where all the red lines are, just because there was already bad drainage in that area. So a lot of digging was occurring there so that we could get positive slope. So back up in where the cursor is, from my understanding, it's pretty minimal as far as, milling out the asphalt and coming back with the new. So I'm not aware, and there's no storm structures that we're installing there. So we're not digging down or doing anything there.
Those sidewalks have already been poured.
Yeah, they've already been poured next to the building. Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're about 14 inches thick or something.
About 14 inches thick, but they got a good stone base. And then
Well, I mean, I was there yesterday and they may have shrunk since then, but is that because you had to take so much gravel out there? You have to fill back up to what, within 4 or 5 inches of those walks or what?
yeah, usually the sidewalks are installed between 4 and 5 inches thick, and then they have a subgrade of like 6 inches of stone. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's an area that they poured thicker, but the sidewalks, for all the other sidewalks that we've observed to be installed, they were installed per the drawings that CDC prepared.
Gotcha.
Anybody else have any questions about what's been presented here as to the reasoning behind the need for the change order? Any questions for Thad while he's on the phone with us about these changes? We've heard staff, both Dawn and Darlene, talk about taking it out of fund balance or appropriate location to help make up the difference. I think we know that we're already behind schedule. We're having to pay this extra rent, and we want to do this as quick as possible. We don't have a lot of options here.
Well, we got to do it.
We got to do it. I mean, it's it.
Yes.
So right now's the time for questions. If no one has a question, then anybody object to putting this on the agenda for the next meeting?
No.
Do we need to prove it at the next meeting?
I have one question.
Okay, Commissioner Matt.
Extra paving for around or going to the trash dumpster. I know you pointed that out before. So the trash dumpster's in that far right corner.
Yeah.
And so how big an area is the paving contractor asking to make it a bigger pavement section?
Actually, the dumpster has, and this is not the dumpster has been moved to the other side of the maintenance building to get more clear of the existing slope there. And the additional paving is just a different type of paving. So it's going to be heavy duty asphalt. And because there's a catch basin now in front of that that we're keeping, we are putting heavy duty asphalt around that area, just kind of where it's coming in and doing kind of a lot of the, as it picks up and does the shaking, just to make sure that everything stays where it needs to stay. So it's upgrading the asphalt in that location. It was already accounted for. It's just the more expensive asphalt.
So basically where the tipping axle is of the trash truck type thing. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, sir, Mr. Rhodes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our final item for the day would be the other business. We have 3 items that are items that we have talked about in the past. And then we'll take up any other additional items any of the commissioners might have. So Don, if you want to update us on billboard.
So, yes, sir, the first item of discussion of the billboard lease, this was something that's previously discussed at last month's work session and then was actually brought back to a regular board meeting for discussion. And at that point, and I have this information included in your packet, at that point, we had received information from Mr. Paul Dix, the president and general manager of Allison Outdoor Advertising, where he had just provided some information in regards to proposed solutions, and also provided information in regards to a proposed Allison Outdoor copy acceptance policy, just providing that's going to be an internal policy for Allison. Since this was new information, I believe the board decided to just assume it and wait to bring this back to the next work session, which is now to discuss further. At the end of the day, the 4 solutions that was discussed with the board at the previous meeting still exist. And what I mean by that is the 4 that I had presented to you was to basically extend the lease or renegotiate the lease that we currently have with them, with that lease to have no restrictions. Basically, you rely completely on Allison Outdoor to decide what copy goes over to those billboards. The second would be to renegotiate the lease and have restrictions on the lease, very similar to the current restrictions that we have. The third solution was to potentially sell the property. And the fourth solution was to basically terminate the lease. Now, after further research, I want to talk about those 4 solutions with the board. Selling the property, I would not recommend selling any property located near the E911 center for the simple fact that those billboards are located in key areas that if we ever choose to move them, I think we could use that property. The property that's located in Silva, I believe we would run into potentially zoning issues in Silva or subdivision issues. Is that
minimum lot size.
So I don't believe we'd be able to subdivide off that small area and sell it to them. So I really don't believe selling is an option. A couple other things to note too, that as I was having conversations with Mr. Dix, I discovered there's actually 2 more billboards that have not been a part of our conversation that's part of the E911 property. If you're coming north on 441, right before you get to the 911 center, there's a little metal building on the left. That's right before you get to the county property. I could get it up online, but there's 2 billboards right behind that, and that technically is on county property also. So the billboard,
technically, it's either on it or not.
it is. It's on.
So,
It's on county property. So going back to the 4 options, I wouldn't recommend that the selling be an option. And at the end of the day, leasing, I can tell you from a staff standpoint, I don't really see any value for Jackson County for leasing these billboards to anybody. The amount of money that we're talking about, the $2,200 a year, and I know we could renegotiate that, and then the amount of money that we may get from the Silva billboards, honestly, is just not worth the time and effort that's being put into having to deal with trying to decide what's appropriate content to go on those billboards or not. And so ultimately, from staff standpoint, at least from my standpoint, manager standpoint, I would not recommend proceeding forward with leases. Now, having said that, if the board wishes to move forward with leases for those billboards, then you do need to decide whether or not you wish to have a lease where you don't control the content, meaning it's just a lease with no restrictions, or would it be a lease in which you still had some restrictions on your lease? And then my final recommendation would be, if you choose to move in that direction, I would still recommend that you terminate the leases. and give the 6 months notice. And then that way Allison has 6 months to come back with an appropriate offer to keep those billboards. So right now it's to the Allison's benefit to continue leases as is, especially since we're paying $50 a year for one of the billboards.
Well, they're paying 50.
They're big.
Or should they're paying $50.
Yeah, I think that's the point to take away from here today is that no matter what we decide we want to do going forward, the thing that needs to happen, no matter what, is to go ahead and terminate the leases. And at least that puts us in the 6 month realm to, if we want to have further discussions going forward, then we can. If we don't, then we just let the 6 months run out and it's over with.
Would that be, from our legal counsel, do you feel that's appropriate?
I do, because it gives you all the options. You still have all the options in front of you.
Sure.
But it starts the time rather than waiting and.
Right. Yes.
So what do we have any idea what a market rate lease should be for these? I mean, even is it 2,200, is that for everything over by the emergency center? How many billboards?
4. There's 2 large ones on each side.
Now, you ought to know that you've rented.
Well, I know, I didn't know about the other 2 though, and that's why I'm looking to see, I don't remember that being.
I'm
called out, but
joking,
There's 4 of them.
you know.
Well, it wasn't long until I started having a conversation, and he kept saying so many, I can't remember what.
I looked the other day because I drove by there.
But I'm wondering
There's
if
2
there's
large ones on each side.
Right, and then there's 2 other ones though you're talking
Yes.
about.
Well, the one in Silva is small.
Is it 1 or 2? It's
2.
It's 2, but
2
they're
little ones
small.
up there. Isn't
They're
there?
both called juniors, I believe.
And then there's 4. Is the $2,200 just for one, or is it for all 4?
It's for everything on that property.
Okay.
Your house.
And they're getting, I think, if
A
what's
lot.
reportedly accurate that was in the media, was it $900 a month for just one or 2? That's 2. Yeah. So $450 a piece.
Oh, we're getting.
Well, and just for discussion purposes, they gave us such a deal, what, we paid $400 for a small one, that
So-
wasn't really a big deal. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. Those,
I'm gonna do, see, we've always been talking about this large billboard. here,
For
but there's 2
litter
smaller
campaign.
ones here that if I drop myself right here. Right there.
Yep.
There's 2
No, it's not that, it's that big one, the red one.
no, they're all 4 of them,
billboards.
yeah.
Those
I'm
2
saying
also.
Those 2 are also on
Oh, I'm sorry.
county.
Both
I didn't
sides of the
realize
big-
those were,
Are they putting that on?
I don't think so, I think they're just,
Can't see 'em.
yeah.
Yeah,
They're
they're
good
just,
signs.
see, this is a
It's okay.
double one. They,
Yeah, see, I don't think they're,
Yes. Don't do that to her.
I'm sorry.
Well, you got her twisted around. It's driving like that.
Well, well, no, I don't think you've seen
You
it
don't work-
back, you've seen inside it, but then there's the large one that we're talking about. For some reason, I was thinking on this side. that they
it's
sometimes
2
have
on the
2.
other side.
Yeah.
I think what they did was Harrah's uses both of them, and that's why it's 900, because it's double. And the other side is 2, I believe. Can we look at the other side or not really? Oh, yeah, see, that's what I was counting on 4. When I counted them, I counted 4 because
How do you do that?
I didn't realize that other smaller one was.
well,
I didn't know that.
it's a car, it's a Google car.
Are you sure that's on our property?
They have a big camera on the car and they
No, not this one. The first one you showed is just, okay. It looks like there's a house in between there.
Well, I was on the phone with Mr. Dixon.
Okay.
He kept
Well, you know.
mentioning that there were so many, I can't remember what's called,
See, I
postings
counted
out there, and I
40
couldn't,
because
I
of
couldn't
that.
come up with the numbers he was coming up with, and he actually had to tell me, well, there's 2 more other than this, and he told me, so then I went and checked on county
Okay,
websites.
well, then you know. I didn't.
Does anybody object to going ahead and moving forward with the cancellation of the lease?
That's good.
Oh, go ahead, Mickey. Sound like you were gonna say something.
Mickey, do you have a comment?
No, I say let it run out.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Mount?
So you talked about, so prior to this most recent event, how much staff time had been spent on this?
Zero.
So I get what you're saying, that this one time in how many years has been an issue. Because it's taken probably way too much time for something that's relatively simple, but I mean, the more I thought about this, I guess I'm kind of leaning towards, I don't have a problem canceling the lease. I think we have to do that because they need to be renegotiated. But then get rid of the language and let Allison manage them how they see fit. And then we aren't taking any potential legal. I mean, granted, I know you might get complaints, but you get complaints about anything as a commissioner. So, you know, it's what it is. But to go ahead and see what a new lease would look like and just have Allison do however they do. Take that language out and then it's not staff's time is basically what I'm getting at. Then you wouldn't have any additional time.
Let me ask a question. This just popped in my head. I'm not even thought about it. And I'm not expecting an immediate reaction, but I know we talked about, Heather, when you last presented this a month ago, but the fact that, and I know this conversation about it being on our property or being near our property, then people assume that could be, even though they manage the signs. And is there a way for them to put some kind of disclaimer, hang a permanent fixture underneath that sign that says the content on this board? I mean,
I'm sure they could.
could that lessen the legal?
Whether or not you can see it, it makes any difference or not. And that's a public forum discussion, and it has to do with a couple things. One are things like how close it is to the building, how so closely associated is it with county property, but also how you use it. If you started giving it away to nonprofits, say for free space, then you're starting to open it up as a public forum. But if it's completely commercial, where you have the lease with Allison and you're just receiving the revenue, and you're not putting messages on there, or opening it up to others to do so, that's really what keeps it from being a public forum and keeps it more commerce.
Because I know, like for like political ads, you have to have that language on there. I mean, it can be tiny letters, but it's enough from a legal standpoint to cover you to meet the statutory requirements. And I didn't know if there was a way that we could force or say in the lease.
Now that this is being discussed, there's people that know that that's on county property.
Oh yeah, now they do.
But before that, did anybody ever drive by and look at that and think that's on county property?
Probably thought it was on DOT property.
You know, I didn't. I mean, I didn't ever think about it.
I don't ever sit, when I see a billboard, I don't ever think about whose property it's on.
No.
It's like, okay, there's
Well,
that.
you know, either Allison owns the property or they're leasing it from the owner. So I always think of it as theirs. And their name's on all the stands, is Allison.
So the only other thing I would point out in these future conversations would be where this is located. So, you know, obviously the ones on the end doesn't impact the operations of our county property. The ones that's on the backside, the American Legion doesn't necessarily impact our operations. But now, I'm not sitting here telling the board that I have a direct use for that property right there, but as you can see, it's flat and it's right next to a storage yard that we have currently. And if that billboard was removed, I'm pretty sure the county would be using that property for public purposes.
So I don't think we've received, well, we did receive this potential solutions, but as far as a actual proposal, we've not received anything from Allison's. So maybe we do like what we were just talking about. We go ahead and cancel the contract, put our notice that we want to cancel the contract, let it expire 6 months. And then that places the burden upon them to reach out to us. If we decide as a board that we want to continue to allow those billboards to be in existence on county property, then the burden would be on them to reach out to us with favorable language that we all could agree with. And we've got 6 months to work it out. And at the end of 6 months, if we don't get it worked out, then they come down.
I assume that they own that pole and those things, all that belongs to Allison.
Yes, ma'am. And that would also be with understanding, we haven't gotten into a little bit more of the legalese of the proposal, but I did mention one option would be to lease it with us not being involved, not putting any restrictions, but technically are there, if we just did a straight lease with them without us putting any restrictions, would they have to follow any other guidelines based upon case law as far as what they do?
Well, and anything that is the law, they would have to follow, but unless we place restrictions on it, it would just fall under their policies like any other billboard. And there are a couple, and if we got into that where we were negotiating a lease, there are a couple other things we probably want to consider, but we can consider those in regard to the lease.
If Allison's put together a proposal for a potential lease, is any of that discussion closed session? Or is that all open session discussions?
It would, I can't think of anything that would put it in the closed session right now.
Okay.
Maybe when we got down to the details of the lease, potentially if there were legal concerns with that, but otherwise.
Okay.
And like moving forward, Rob, like your question about what's a fair price. The only way I can tell you what a fair price is you don't have to authorize me to go spend money to basically get somebody to come in and tell me what a fair price is. And what I mean is that you can hire people to figure out.
I'm thinking more, what is Allison paying?
That's,
for
yeah, we
that?
can
Was
call
really-
it.
I'm not talking about like hiring an appraisal service
No.
or something, but just,
No.
I guarantee
What
they're
do
not
they
paying you
charge?
$50 a month for the one
We
that
do
they're
every
paying.
year, yeah.
Yeah, a year, yeah. So, you know, if, for a similar billboard, what are they getting in lease payments in Jackson County?
And they may or may not want to tell us that.
That's true. Absolutely true.
We could reach out to other property owners and ask them.
We can
couldn't
find out.
If that's public, because I don't know, sometimes contractual agreements are private.
It probably is, I mean, I can certainly search and see what's online, what's on record with other leases, that there might be some out there. We could do some research.
To pull this thing back to the focal point here, everybody's okay with putting it on the agenda for the next meeting?
we? Yes.
No objections? Okay.
Next item of discussion is the NCACC goals. I have included a couple pieces of information in the packets. One was just basically a summary of the process for this year for submitting goals. And then this second item is what I did want to do is just provide you a copy of last year's goals, just so that you can see how the NCACC views these things. So I just want to break it down. You look at last year, they had priority goals of seek legislation funding and other efforts to expand digital infrastructure, broadband capability. Seek additional, number 2 is seek additional revenue sources, including a statewide bond, lottery proceeds to address statewide public school issues. 3, support efforts to pressure and expand the existing local revenue base for counties. Authorize local option revenue sources. That number 3 right there, Gail kind of expands a little bit on to what Grant County was asking. In
Yes,
regards to preserve and expand existing local revenue. So to preserve it, a lot of times that's getting into whether or not new categories of people should be tax exempt, and also about whether or not we can get reimbursements.
yes.
For lost revenue. 4, support provision of state resources, ensure county ability to provide essential public health, behavioral health, and social services. 5, seek legislation to repeal the statutory authority that allows local school board to file suit against the county board. Now, that was the top 5, but ultimately they had other priorities under health and human services and under public education, general government, and tax and finance.
And those are all the steering committees that
Yeah.
meet.
Can you
on
go
regular
back?
basis.
Oh, go back up just a minute to that first page where you were, on this section. Further. I think it's number 1. Go further up.
Yeah.
No, past that one. One more. Oh, maybe it's, go, I think it's number 1.
Are you looking for the top priority goal?
No, I want to show y'all something. Keep going up.
Oh, yeah. There's
There's
somebody here that we know.
somebody you might know right there.
Well,
Who is that guy?
That's me.
who's that
Where?
person?
That's me. I'm speaking at the goals
That young
thing.
when you was younger?
Yeah, it was when I was younger. Sorry, shameless self-promotion.
So
No,
I've-
it is important though, because the legislature, I think, really does, don't they? Chairman McMahon, they take these into consideration.
They do,
So,
and I think it's important to note that you look at the top 5, while those 5 are very important goals, there are a lot of other goals listed on the pages that follow this
yes,
that Don just scrolled through a few minutes ago, because each one of those subsections or those committee areas have a whole list of goals or potential goals underneath. And this is a process, and at the goals conference is the top 5 are chosen, in which all 100 counties vote to rank. And these really impact people statewide in the most ways. So I think if we put forth a goal, it would probably come under the Environment Committee.
yes. I believe
If we
so.
go with the goal, submitting a goal based on what Commissioner Woody has suggested, then we would approve it. It would go to the Environment Committee where it would be heard there. And then they would vote to rank it in their list, and then it would be forwarded on to the Goals Committee and to the full board of the Board of Directors before it goes even to this conference. So it's a long, lengthy, very detailed, involved process to get to where we eventually would approve these at a goals conference.
Well, and one thing that I have learned from being involved with this process is even if it's not one of the top 5, if it is presented as a goal and accepted, then if we as individual commissioners would contact one of our legislators and cite this as one of the goals of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, it carries more weight. And I think that's important as we advocate for our local concerns.
Yeah, and I also think that I've heard staff at the association say that they use this as a piece of a steering. It steers them in what direction they need to go, and they focus on the top 5,
Sure.
They devote the majority of their efforts towards the top 5. But in their discussions with legislators, if something came up that's way down on the list in one of these other categories, then by having this document, by having these approved goals, then they can say, oh yeah, that's in
Right.
the environment committee goal. And so while it's not one of our top 5, it is an important goal. And so they're prepared to be ready to advocate on behalf of that potential goal. So what do we need to do to be in a position to have some kind of language for us to vote on as a resolution?
For the trying to take over the erosion control.
Yeah.
If that is a goal, which I'm assuming is from this board, then what I would do is I would present it to the board Tuesday, just to vote on authorizing you to submit that for the county. Because there's 2 ways it can be submitted, our goals can be submitted. One is by resolution, the other is by letter from the chairman representing the board as a whole. Normally that requires a vote. So any goals that you want to identify here, plus that goal, I would write up as a goal, present it to you Tuesday, and you as a board would vote on it. And you could tweak the language, not tweak the language, and then you would use that. We use that as a letter to submit to the association.
Okay. So can we have a draft by Tuesday to look at of this proposed language? Okay.
So it could be, I'm looking at the environment goals right now from last year. And they're written very generally, which I totally understand. Number 1, almost on page 19, you read it and just think about what Commissioner Woody's talking about. You might already have a model for what a goal might look like.
Yeah.
Actually, not the guiding principles. Because that
Page
goal falls
19.
into the guiding principles, a couple of them. That number 1, seek legislation to restore county authority over solid waste management.
Yeah, that is exactly. Yeah.
Seek legislation to provide the opportunity for county authority over sediment erosion, whatever it's,
Soil.
coming up with the wording.
Yeah.
So there's a pretty good model, I think, for what we're talking about.
That's exactly
That
right.
is good.
The letter would be specific for our legislators really asking for what we're looking for. And yes, this would be just more generalized.
Right.
So did they ask for a resolution?
It could be done by letter, go back to the first.
Yeah. I'm just making sure the format
Yeah.
of what they're asking, the exact format.
That's true. Yeah, that's good. Wording there, I think.
Not the resolution, a letter from board chair on behalf of the full board. And that's what I'm looking at. A letter from the board chair on behalf of the full board. That's what I'm. The only reason I'm staying away from the resident is I'm gonna keep it simple, and if there's other goals, I think I've also heard broadband, that you wanted to reiterate that, and if there's any other goals that you want to submit, then that's the purpose of today's meeting, and then I would go and generalize them, like you just read, and then submit them to you in that form, and then
Yeah, and
they
we
would
could,
authorize you to send it.
we could add the one about broadband as well, and especially highlight in light of the COVID-19 closing of schools, it has really highlighted our lack of universal broadband in Jackson County. I mean, that's obviously other things as well, but I know from speaking to teachers right now who are trying to make sure all their students are online, it's been really a challenge.
Your wife still teaching?
No, she retired. Last year was her first year. She retired.
I was talking to a teacher Sunday,
This
church.
spring she retired. This spring, yeah.
She said it's about to drive her crazy.
It's so hard
She
because
said,
some of them,
it's, Said there's so many kids who just can't fit in.
They
And
can't.
doesn't have the ability, and don't have the,
It's a
All have
huge,
access to
so
internet,
let's,
and it's a
could we do
great
two?
divide
Yeah.
amongst people who have internet access and people who don't.
Yes, it is.
Well, the only thing, and I'll just make this as a comment, I'm totally in support of anything with broadband.
Okay.
I just feel like that's one of our number one
It
goals
is.
anyway,
It's
and
gonna
there's
go.
so many people that are gonna advocate on behalf of that.
You're right.
It's not that it doesn't hurt for us to reiterate that goal, but I think the uniqueness of this other goal is that we may be the only county to submit that goal.
That's true.
And,
That's a good point.
I think everybody will be overwhelmingly in favor of broadband.
Yes. Well, I was surprised, this one, course I'm taking that legal from UNC School of Government, the chairman of the Board of Education from Orange County is on that. And, that's Chapel Hill area. I just assumed everybody would have great broadband there, and they don't. I mean, they're struggling, just maybe not quite as much as we are, but they're struggling. And so it is a universal issue.
So Don, you will work something up that will provide enough detail, because obviously a letter saying this is what we want as a goal, but it will say, it'll have enough detail for somebody in a committee somewhere will understand why we're asking this. Be part of the letter. Okay. Other thoughts?
I was very hot when I did it. I am very cold.
Other thoughts?
Damn cold front come through while we're in this meeting.
It gets colder throughout the day,
Oh.
afternoon and evening.
It could may snow later, see.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
Right.
Absolutely.
I might need to bring a sweater and just leave it here.
Okay, I think then we're ready to move on to the next topic, the monument alterations. Don, can you give us an update? I know you've been doing some research about what potentially can be done, because we're not just dealing with something very simple. It is a stone base, and there are issues with what you can and can't do. And I know you've been doing some research.
So the research that's been done is that it's going to be better to cover up versus to try to remove.
Okay.
When you're dealing with the stone, you can go and do sandblasting and things of that nature, but the reality is sandblasting, from what I'm understanding, is that it can't be deep letters. I mean, you would have to get more into cutting versus sandblasting. And then also, it just really depends upon the thickness or the depth of what you're trying to remove in regards to how well you can do it on stone. So going back to the charge of removing the flag and also removing the wording, the recommendation really is going to be covering it up with nice plastic, well, basically plaques with the appropriate metal that can be weathered and things of that nature. And so I've had maintenance go out there with me and look at it, and I know that they've been researching the different types of plaques to cover everything. And so the reality is, I think we've come up with a solution on to do basically what's been asked or directed by this board. I think where I am and where staff would be is now going through a process of trying to find out what would be on, what would actually be the language on the just as you, of course, are aware of the board, in your discussions, there's been discussions about identifying soldiers who died in the Civil War. There's been discussions about identifying both Confederate and Union. Really, other than that discussion, discussion along with covering up wording and or the flag, that is as much direction I believe that I've gotten at this point. So I think now I'm looking for direction from the board about how do you wish to proceed forward to just come up with a language that goes on the plaque and goes on. I think there's a lot of room there, not only with the plaque that would cover up the flag itself, but when you start talking about the plaque around the base, more than likely we would want to make it even. So you wouldn't just put a plaque where it says, "Oh, here to the Confederacy." More than likely we'd want to try to go around the base. So that brings up a little bit more room for language if you choose to do so. And so at this point, I'm really just looking for direction from the board about getting into details of the language.
And I'll go ahead and start with some thoughts that I had. Don't have anything in writing. And this is what I had envisioned, and of course I'm anxious to hear what others feel like or they have envisioned as we work through this process. And I'll say personally, I think maybe this is a decision that we as a board probably need to make. A lot of times we ask committees to draft things, but it might be, my opinion, it might be easier for us just to do it. But I really envisioned that on this big plaque that would be over top of the flag section, that it be sort of a summary of the history of not only Jackson County's involvement in the Civil War, but the history of that monument as well. And that it could say, we could craft some language and work on the language to say, you know, Jackson County was formed in 1851, and then this being the first war that the people of this county fought in, and these are the troops that came from this county. These were the particular points of history that are relevant Civil War to that whole time period, notable people or groups that served, highlight the fact that there were people who served in the Union armies. I know that's been brought up. We highlight the entire picture of our involvement, both from a Southern and a Northern perspective. And whatever else we want to say, then talk about the fact that in 1915, this Jackson County residents raised the money, tell the story of what happened in 1915 that we know that's in print. Talk about the history of that. Talk about the history of the rededication that happened in 96, and just sort of paint a picture of both the history of the monument and the history of our Civil War involvement here from a local perspective. And that be on that main plaque. And then if we wanted to put names on the other plaques down below, we could obviously have enough room then to put people's names. But that was just my initial thought. What do others think? And we don't have to decide this today. Obviously, it's a place for us to start.
Well, I got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So we received an email with some indicating you had met with some folks from Reconcile Silva.
Correct.
And my understanding is that meeting relocation was discussed and it wasn't necessarily off the board based on everybody's reaction to that meeting. So if that's the case, I don't even know why we're talking about modifications.
So repeat that
I
again.
didn't get that from that email.
Not from the email, I'm talking about what people have told me happened at that meeting. That relocation was discussed at that meeting and it's not necessarily off the table.
I did not mention that.
Okay, just thought I'd ask because their impression is that that was still a possibility. So you might want to clarify that with some of the people that were in attendance.
The four individuals that were there, and my comments to them was that they questioned whether or not we had the authority to go in and alter the statute. And I quoted what Ms. Baker had shared with us from the School of Government, and that why hadn't we done anything as of yet? And I said, well, it's on our agenda for today. And would we relocate it? And I said, well, the same law that we're using as justification for altering the statute says that the only way it could be ever relocated would be to a site of equal prominence, which does not exist. And I pretty much said at the end, the whole conversation that I had with them was, I think there are other opportunities to further discussions about ways that we recognize and celebrate diversity and make this community a better community for neighbors, working with neighbors, and that I think we need to be exploring those options instead of talking about the statute, because that's not an issue anymore. And that's how I sort of left it with them after about an hour's of discussion.
And they, in that email, it did offer some suggestions of working for some reconciliation in our community with very specific things, which I thought were real helpful. What they said. I think I would like somehow to add some statement of unity as far as the fact that just, I guess, emphasizing that now we're one nation. I don't know what that would look like, and I'm not really the best person maybe to think of wording, but I'd like to explore that, of how we could put something, you know, one nation, now we're one nation. And I know that that was the focus of our national government at the end of the Civil War. How do we reunite and become that one nation?
The whole Reconstruction movement was about trying to reconstruct. I totally agree with that.
Some statement like that would be important to me.
Well, a lot of this coming about because of Reconstruction.
The failure of Reconstruction.
Reconstruction started, and then certain things started happening during
one nation though, Ron.
during Reconstruction, and we decided we didn't like Reconstruction because.
Well, that's true.
Didn't it?
And it could be just a blank.
I'll tell you what, can you put a, what is that?
Mickey's Mouse, I think.
How wide is that, just the flag itself? What's the dimensions?
Give me a second, I can pull the, I've actually got a piece of paper that's doing that, I don't have it off the top of my head.
Well, is it 2 by 4 or?
I'm just not gonna guess. Or if you want me to, while y'all still talking about it, I'll go run the.
No, I want to know what you think it is. I'm gonna hold you to it.
It's one of those things until you actually go and measure it, it's probably bigger than you think it is.
Probably. I wonder if you can get a piece of marble. If you, I wonder if you can get a piece of marble cut and put on that.
It's very hard to drill through. A marble's not as sturdy as you think.
Okay, so.
What's deep?
The flag, it has.
About 2 inches.
Well, it's inside that though, isn't it? It's not standing outside.
It's bas relief.
So it protrudes.
What's that called?
Protrudes out, so anything, the solution that's gonna go on there, whether it be a plaque or marble or whatnot, is the best way I can describe is think of like a cookie sheet.
Yeah.
You know, like a pan, you know what I'm saying, that has depth to it.
And it has edge and you put
Let's
that.
say a cookie sheet, that's what a pan with depth to it, that literally can go on there. And then you could do it like I'm describing, or you could actually just have points of where it connects. But like if you're doing marble, like you're talking about, then it would be a marble pan with a little depth to it, so it can just cover
I don't know if
everything.
you can do
You
that.
gotta be able to attach it to the wall.
I don't know if you do that.
Can't
Ken.
really-
I don't know.
I mean, you could probably drill into the base and put some anchors and then have spacers on it to where it stick out over top of the, and then mount that.
But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, if that was whatever it is, cross our, was a blank slate, be satisfied with that right there and leave it like it is.
Just blank.
One thing, as far as the bronze plaque, for aesthetics, the backside has a bronze plaque on it. So if we put one on the front, it would really, it matches what would be on the back. Isn't that bronze on the back? Yeah.
Because it would age, you're going
Uh-huh.
something that ages appropriately. You got a couple.
Oh, I know, it wouldn't look the
Yeah.
same for a while, but yeah. Over time, it would definitely be similar.
Yeah. Can we now think on it for a while?
Yeah, we don't have to make a decision.
I'd like to done look at it. I went down there about 20 years ago. I've not been down there since. So look. You been right down to it, Ron?
I have not run up and down the stairs recently because you
Well,
can't.
they don't
so
tell you.
Well, I just went, I
identify
went
it.
the other, about a month ago and looked all around.
Oh, I've talked to a lot of people said they didn't know there's a flag on it.
And
But now I talked to one fella.
the other plaque,
He said, I don't know how many times I've been up and down them steps. He said, I didn't even notice this statue.
well, there you go.
I'm serious too.
Well, that's where I'd leave it from staff. We have several solutions that we think we can appropriately cover. Leaving it blank, or we could decoratively cover it to where it'd be appropriate, look good, and last a very long time. So we have multiple solutions that we can come back and show you aesthetically different solutions.
Okay,
That is technically the easy part of these conversations, but the potentially longer part of these conversations is there anything to be put on this plan? If not, then that's, I can start going down the path of how to cover it up as quickly as possible.
And going back, Commissioner Mao, to the meeting where I met with those 4 individuals. Surprisingly enough, they object to us altering it. They objected to us doing anything to it. They would prefer that we left it alone. Which I think is interesting because, you know, the town of Silva passed the resolution banning the display of the Confederate flag, and that being the most prominent part of it, the part that is the most contentious, you would think that would be something that would be favorable with. At least those 4 individuals that spoke that day.
they still wanted it moved.
Yeah.
But not altered.
Well, I think
But
what I've heard from people is they've asked the question, why do you want to degrade your family member's tombstone, which is what a lot of people have said it represents to them.
Well, we'll continue to discuss it as a group. Work on, taken site visits, and I may even propose, put in writing some words. Maybe Commissioner Woody and I can take a stab at it. May not go anywhere, but at least we'll attempt. Now, there's nothing else. Usually we have an other business. Anything else, Commissioner Ryan? Do you have anything else you
I
want?
just want, I don't know if everybody saw, was it in the last couple of days that the legislature passed the law about schools are going to be funded at the same level regardless
Yes.
of enrollment?
Yes,
That's
They
cool.
lost school,
very
so
positive, yes. I was
Been
so
wondering
pleased
about
to see that.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased too that they're paying for
Yes.
the lunches.
Yeah.
There was,
They're paying for the meals.
yes,
That no kids pay now.
Yeah.
That's a very strong policy.
it is. I think those are some very
The
positive
state
steps.
legislature
yes.
did that.
We should let them know. we
All meals are
appreciate
free from now on, or?
Well, at least for this,
I'm not sure what the time period is.
Yeah.
that.
It doesn't,
Corbin,
any and all.
there had been, they've gone back to where you had to be on free and reduced lunch and that whole program, but all of a sudden they came out and they made us a phone call the other night and said, everybody, even, it didn't make any difference. Under 18 is free.
That may be
I think it is federal through the,
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's here back.
came down through the Department of Agriculture, USDA.
I'm glad our legislature came. together.
Mr. Woody, do you have anything?
No.
Any additional items?
I do
Steve? Commissioner Luker? Do you have
Mr.
anything?
Chairman, I don't, other than just say that I look forward to your presentation of what you're going to present on your suggestion today
Okay, all right.
on the plat. So that's
I'll
it.
work on that. Anything else from staff? All right, sounds like we're done. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
For a second,
Second,
all in favor, say aye.
aye.
All right, thank y'all for letting me be part of the little commissioner deal.